The question on the board. The chalk screeched across the endless blackboard like it was cutting through bone. Students flinched. Not because of the sound, but because of the man holding the chalk, Professor Renwick, the most feared mathematics lecturer on campus. He wasn't just strict. He enjoyed watching people fail. "Your midterm is in 3 days," he said, turning to the silent room. "Most of you will fail. Not because the exam is hard, but because you're simply not good enough." A few students exchanged uncomfortable looks. No one dared breathe too loudly. Renwick smirked. But he tapped the final equation he had just written. A monstrous string of symbols and numbers that looked like it belonged in a research lab, not a classroom. "If anyone in this room solves this before the end of the semester," he paused, letting the weight of the words sink in, "I will personally recommend them to the Global Institute of Mathematical Sciences. Full scholarship, lifetime recognition, a fast-track career." Gasps rippled around the room. Everyone knew what that meant. That institute produced Nobel winners, millionaires, people whose names got printed in textbooks. And, Renwick added with a laugh, "I'll even throw in something extra." He turned, underlining the final part of the equation like he was signing a death warrant. "If someone solves it," he said arrogantly, "I'll marry them." The class erupted. Laughter, shock, disbelief, a joke, obviously. The professor was mocking them. Mocking their intelligence. Mocking their future. Only one person didn't react. At the back of the room, wearing a faded gray uniform and pushing a mop bucket, stood Elias, the university janitor. Head down, silent, invisible. Students walked by him every day without ever learning his name. A nobody. To them. Renwick tossed the chalk onto the desk. "Class dismissed. Go study. Or don't. It won't change the result." Chairs scraped the floor. Backpacks zipped. Students rushed out, buzzing with mock frustration. "That guy's insane. Look at that equation. It's not even human." "He really thinks he's a god," Elias quietly continued. Mopping as the room emptied, only one student stayed behind. Lena, a top student, always sitting front row, always taking notes like her life depended on it. "Professor," she said, "is that equation even solvable?" Renwick turned sharply, annoyed someone dared question him. "Everything is solvable, but not by you." Lena swallowed, wounded, but didn't argue. She left. Renwick gathered his papers, humming smugly, until he noticed something. Elias was staring at the board. Not casually, studying it. Renwick tilted his head. "You can stop pretending," he said with an amused tone. "That's not a floor stain. That's graduate-level mathematics." Elias didn't respond. Just kept looking. "Do you even understand what any of that means?" The professor mocked. "Or is it just art to you?" Elias finally spoke, voice calm, low, thoughtful. "The divergence term shouldn't be there." Renwick blinked. "What?" Elias pointed at the middle of the equation with the wet end of his mop handle. "That symbol. It shouldn't be there. It breaks symmetry. Your equation won't hold under non-Euclidean conditions." The room went dead quiet. Renwick stared. Janitors weren't supposed to talk like that. Not in his classroom. Not anywhere. "Do you even know what this equation is?" the professor asked, voice suddenly sharper. Elias nodded. "Modified Navier-Stokes with an entropy term." Renwick felt something shift inside him. How does a janitor know that? Elias returned to mopping as if nothing happened. "Where did you study?" Renwick asked, suspicion edging into curiosity. Elias didn't answer. "I asked you a question. Still nothing." Elias finished mopping, wrung out the cloth, and began toward the door. "You're not allowed to touch that board," Renwick snapped. "It's for my students." Elias paused at the door. "Then maybe teach them something worth learning." He left. Renwick stood frozen. No one, no colleague, no student, no administrator had ever spoken to him like that before. A janitor just had. The next day, the equation on the board was still there. Students entered, stared at it, complained, tried to copy it down, gave up. Renwick watched them with bored contempt. Then something happened. Lena entered, but instead of taking her usual seat, she walked to the equation, slowly, hesitantly. Something was different. There, In small chalk handwriting beneath the equation was a correction, a single line of work. Precise, elegant, flawless. Students whispered. Who wrote that? That wasn't there yesterday. Renwick didn't write that. The professor stared at it, stunned. It was the exact correction the janitor mentioned. He erased it quickly, pretending nothing happened. But now, he was rattled. Later that evening, after the campus emptied, Renwick returned to the classroom, locked the door, turned on only one lamp, and sat staring at the board. He wrote more equations, erased them, wrote again. He was trying to fix what Elias had pointed out. His hand started shaking because Elias was right. And the more Renwick tried to fix it, the more he realized the janitor hadn't guessed. He understood. Renwick stared at the board, haunted. Who is he? The next morning, Elias was at work again, replacing trash bags. Students ignored him like always, but today, someone approached him. Lena, you corrected the equation, didn't you? She asked softly. Elias said nothing. No one else could have done it, she continued. I saw you staring at it yesterday. You knew what was wrong. Elias kept working, silent as ever. Why are you a janitor? Lena asked. You're clearly smarter than everyone here, even the professor. Elias paused. His eyes softened, but only for a second. Being smart doesn't mean being welcome, he said. Before she could ask what he meant, the classroom door slammed open. Professor Renwick stormed in, eyes locked on Elias. You, he said coldly. In my office, now. Students stared, some smirking, some confused. Elias didn't react. He set down the trash bag and followed. Renwick's office was lined with awards, diplomas, framed headlines with his name on them. A shrine to himself. He closed the door behind Elias. Sit, he ordered. Elias remained standing. Renwick folded his arms. You think you're clever? Fixing my equation? I didn't fix it, Elias replied calmly. I just stopped it from being wrong. The insult hit deeper than any shouting could. Renwick leaned in. Who taught you mathematics? Elias met his gaze. Life. Don't play games with me. Where did you study? What's your degree? What are you hiding? Elias said nothing. Renwick slammed his fist on the desk. You're a janitor. A mop and a trash cart. That's what you are. Elias didn't flinch. And yet, he said quietly, you're the one afraid. Renwick froze. Those words, that tone, that truth. Before he could respond, a knock came at the door, followed by the dean's voice. Professor Renwick, we need to speak. It's urgent, the professor glared at Elias. This isn't over, he whispered, but Elias was already walking out. As he passed the dean, she gave him a strange look, like she recognized him or remembered him, and suddenly, everything was no longer just about an equation. It was about a secret, a past. A truth Renwick wasn't prepared for, because Elias wasn't just a janitor. He was someone the university had tried very hard to forget. And soon, everyone would know why. The man they erased. The rumor spread through campus like wildfire. The janitor corrected the professor's impossible equation. Some laughed it off, some didn't. By noon, Elias could feel the eyes on him, people staring as he emptied trash bins, whispering after he passed. But he didn't speed up. He didn't change his routine. He moved with the same quiet, steady rhythm, like someone who had lived long enough to know that attention was temporary. But truth was not. At the lunch courtyard, a group of engineering students watched him sweep. Is that really him? That's the guy who messed with Renwick's board? He looks homeless, not genius. One of them snickered loud enough for Elias to hear. Maybe he just guessed the answer. Like a monkey typing Shakespeare. Elias didn't react. His silence wasn't weakness. It was discipline, the kind built from years of being looked at and never seen. Across the courtyard, Lena sat alone with a notebook open but untouched. She wasn't thinking about her assignments. She was thinking about Elias. Her mind replayed his words again and again. Being smart doesn't mean being welcome. Why did that sound like someone who had already lived through something? Not just a random thought? She slammed her notebook shut and stood. She didn't want answers from rumors. She wanted the truth. Inside the administration building, behind frosted glass walls and polished floors, a different conversation was unfolding. Dean Harrow sat at her desk, expression tight, as Professor Renwick paced back and forth in front of her. "This isn't a joke," Renwick snapped. "Someone is tampering with my work. A janitor is writing on my board. And it's not just any correction. It's mathematically accurate." The dean folded her hands. "And why does that bother you, Professor?" Renwick stopped pacing. "Because I don't know who he is. I know every scholar, every researcher in this country worth knowing, but him? Nothing, no record, no degree, no past." The dean's gaze flicked away for just a second, Renwick noticed. "You know who he is, don't you?" Silence, a slow, dangerous silence. Finally, the dean spoke. Some doors were closed for a reason. "Professor, that's not an answer. It's the only one you're going to get. If you're wise..." Renwick leaned forward. "You're hiding something." "No," she said. "I'm protecting something." That was the moment Renwick understood something he wasn't meant to. Elias wasn't a coincidence. He was a secret the university desperately wanted to keep buried. Later that evening, Lena found Elias outside the mechanical workshop, repairing an old radiator leak. The sound of dripping water echoed in the empty hall. She approached slowly. "You don't talk much, do you?" she said. He glanced up. "Talking rarely changes anything." "Then let me ask instead," she said, sitting across from him on a crate. "Why do you know so much math?" He adjusted the wrench calmly. "Because I needed to." That's not an answer. He didn't look at her. But there was the faintest trace of a smile. "It's the only one you're getting. If you're wise." She froze. Those were the exact words the dean said earlier. Coincidence? Or connection? "Why are you here, Elias?" she asked, voice lower now. "Why this university?" "Why, like this." He tightened the bolt, wiped his hands, then finally turned to face her. "Because some places are better watched from the outside." A chill ran through her. Watched? By who? By someone who knows what it looks like when a system rots from the inside. Before she could respond, footsteps echoed down the hall. Renwick. He walked in slowly, but his eyes were burning. "Leave us," he said to Lena. She hesitated. Elias didn't. "It's fine," he said softly. "Go." She left, but not far. She hid behind the wall, close enough to hear every word. Renwick stepped closer. "You're not just a janitor," he said. "So let's stop pretending." Elias said nothing. "You corrected my equation. Your equation was wrong. You knew exactly why it was wrong." "Yes." Renwick clenched his jaw. "Who are you?" Elias stood up. He didn't look defensive. He looked tired. "You don't want that answer." "Oh, I do," Renwick growled. "Because right now I see a man who should not exist. A man who should not have this knowledge, whose name is not in any academic archive, not in any research grant, not in any publication. It's like you were erased." Elias looked at him. "I was." That one sentence hit harder than any confession. Renwick stared. "By who?" Elias picked up his tool bag. "By the same kind of men who reward arrogance and punish truth." Renwick didn't know why, but he suddenly felt small in front of him, like Elias wasn't beneath him, but beyond him. "You think you're smarter than me?" Renwick snapped, grasping at ego like oxygen. "No," Elias said gently. "I think you're scared of someone who doesn't need your world to exist." Renwick's breath caught. Because it was true. All his life, awards, reputation, brilliance, all of it was built inside a system that crowned him genius. But Elias, he lived outside it and still beat him. Renwick's voice dropped. "Quieter this time. You could destroy everything I've built." Elias met his gaze with unshakable calm. "I'm not here to destroy anything. I'm here to see if it's worth saving." At that moment, Renwick saw it. This wasn't a janitor. This was a man measuring something far bigger than an equation. He was measuring character, and Renwick was not passing. A wave of panic rushed through the professor, because if Elias had the power to fix the equation, he also had the power to finish it and claim everything. Fame, recognition, the Institute scholarship, the prestige, the spotlight, everything Renwick promised. As a joke, Renwick took a step back. "What are you planning?" Elias shouldered the tool bag. "The truth doesn't need planning," he said. "It just needs the right moment." Then he walked away and left Renwick standing in the hallway, with the terrifying realization the moment was coming. That night, campus security cameras recorded something unusual. 17 a.m., Mathematics Hall, empty corridor. Lights flicker on. Elias entered quietly, unlocked a supply closet, and took out not a mop, but chalk. He walked into Renwick's classroom. The equation was still there. He stared at it for a long moment, like someone standing over a grave of something that once had potential. Then, he lifted the chalk and began to write, not one correction, not a line, not a note, an entire sequence. Equations flowing like water, revealing layer after layer, each stroke more impossible than the last. Cameras caught him writing for 37 minutes straight, without stopping, without erasing once. His hand moved like he'd already solved it years ago. When he finished, he stepped back. The unsolvable equation was no longer unsolved. It was completed, not just solved, transformed. The kind of work that wins world prizes, the kind that rewrites books, the kind that makes history. Elias looked at it, his face unreadable. Then he did something shocking. He dropped the chalk and walked away, leaving the full solution behind. No signature, no name, just truth unclaimed, waiting like a storm no one was ready for. The next morning, when students entered the classroom, they stopped in their tracks, screams, gasps, phones, out, photos, videos, and then the door opened. "Professor." Renwick walked in, saw the board and the blood drained from his face. Because the solution wasn't just correct. It was beautiful. It was the work of someone far beyond him, someone who didn't need credit, someone who had already lost it once. And suddenly, the question was no longer who solved it, but why did a man like that ever become a janitor? And what would happen now that the world was about to know? The genius they buried. The photo of the solved equation traveled faster than any announcement the university had ever posted. Within 2 hours, it was on every student's phone. By noon, it was on academic forums and math communities across the world. By evening, emails from research institutes began flooding the deans. Inbox, someone had solved the impossible. Someone on their campus. Someone who hadn't signed their name. Theories exploded. A visiting scholar must have snuck in. Maybe Renwick finally cracked it. No way. He would have bragged instantly. Then who? Ghost? Genius hacker? Secret prodigy? And then a rumor started, only a whisper at first. It was the janitor. At first, nobody believed it. Then people who had seen Elias near the board spoke up. Someone posted a photo of his correction from the previous day. Then someone else uploaded security footage. There he was, a man in overalls, standing in front of the board at 1:17 a.m., writing like a man who already knew the answer. The campus exploded. Professor Renwick sat alone in his office staring at the screen of his laptop. Dozens of emails, journal requests, invitations for interviews, lectures, funding, all assuming he had solved it. His name trended online. Renwick equation. Breakthrough, Professor stuns academic world again. Impossible problem solved by Renwick. Nobel potential. His fingers hovered above the keyboard. One sentence could make it all real. Yes, I solved it. One lie, a lie no one could disprove. Except one man, a janitor with no degree. No publications. No reputation. Someone the world wouldn't believe. Someone the university already erased once. Renwick leaned back. He could take it all. It would be easy. but he couldn't get rid of one thing. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Elias staring at the board, writing with a calm mastery Renwick had never possessed. He saw someone better and worse, someone not angry about it. That terrified him more than anything, because a man who doesn't want credit cannot be bribed. Meanwhile, Lena found Elias in the old library stacks, the part of campus most students never visited. He was sweeping the floor, like nothing in the world had changed. But everything had. "You solved it," she said. He didn't answer. "You solved the equation that every research team failed for years, and you just walked away. Why?" Elias leaned on the broom. "Because the solution wasn't the victory." Then what was? He looked at her, and for the first time she saw something in his eyes. Pain, not current pain, old pain. Buried pain. "The truth," he said simply. Lena took a step closer. "What truth?" "That the world doesn't fail geniuses," he said quietly. "It buries them when they don't obey." Her breath caught. She sat down slowly on a dusty chair. "Tell me what happened to you." For a long moment, Elias said nothing, then he began. "Before I was a janitor, I was a mathematician, not in arrogance. Just fact. I was the youngest candidate ever accepted into the Global Institute, the same one Renwick talked about. I wasn't just a student there. I was going to change everything." He spoke like he was reciting from a locked memory. "They called me a phenomenon. A prodigy. I solved problems no one else touched. They offered me everything. Labs, grants, teams. The world was finally opening." Lena listened, silent. "But genius isn't invincible," he said. "It's fragile, especially when it threatens the wrong people. What happened?" "There was a discovery," Elias said. "A major one. Something worth millions, maybe billions. I proved a model that exposed a flaw in a tech corporation's patented design. They weren't just wrong. They were lying to investors. I went to my mentor. I thought truth mattered." "And it didn't," Lena whispered. He nodded once. "They silenced me. My research vanished. My name disappeared from the system. My funding terminated. My student record deleted. Rumors spread that I cheated, that I plagiarized, that I had a mental breakdown. And no one defended you." "Some tried," he said softly. "They paid for it." Lena's throat tightened. "What about your family?" "Gone by then. I had no one left to lose except my work. And they took that too." He paused. "And so I became what no one sees. Because the invisible man can go anywhere. Hear anything? Watch everything. And you chose this university," Lena realized. "Yes, because this place was built on the same system that destroyed me. Because someday, someone inside it would expose themselves, and I would be here when they did." "That someone was Renwick," she said. "He thinks he's a king, but kings fall the same way mathematicians do, when the truth catches them." "And now?" she asked. Elias looked at her with quiet conviction. "Now the world knows the equation is solved. Soon they'll want the name behind it. Renwick will have to decide how much truth he's willing to let exist. And if he lies?" Elias smiled a little, not proudly, not cruelly. "Just knowingly. I don't fight with anger, Lena. I fight with inevitability," she swallowed. "You're not done, are you?" "No," he said. Solving the equation was never the end. It was the beginning. The dean sat in the boardroom with 3 trustees, all high-ranking. "All furious. This footage went viral overnight," one snapped, slamming a printed still of Elias writing. "A janitor solved a world-class mathematical proof in our building," another said. "Do you know how insane that sounds? It sounds like a lawsuit waiting to happen," the third added. "If he has a past with this university or any academic claim, we are liable for suppression, negligence, intellectual theft," the dean cut in sharply. "You are assuming he wants anything. He hasn't made a claim." "That's the problem," one trustee shouted. "He hasn't spoken, he hasn't published, he hasn't denied. And until he does, we are sitting on a bomb." "And Renwick?" Another sneered. "If he tries to take credit and the truth comes out, we go up in flames." "We need to control this narrative," the board chair said. "We offer Elias a position. Clean clothes, papers, back pay, Recognition. Something. The dean shook her head slowly. You don't understand him, she said. He doesn't want what you want. He wants accountability. And that, said the chair darkly, makes him dangerous. Night fell. Renwick's office light still burned. He sat in silence, staring at 2 documents on his desk. Paper 1, the official press release naming him the solver of the equation. Paper 2, a blank statement declining credit and naming Elias instead. 2 paths, one of glory, one of humiliation. But before he could choose, a sound came from behind him. The door. He turned. Elias was standing there. No broom, no bucket, just him. How did you get in? Renwick demanded. You left the door unlocked. Renwick's voice trembled. What do you want? Elias stepped in, closed the door behind him. The same thing I wanted back then, he said softly. Truth. You think I'll hand you credit? No, Elias said. I think you'll show the world who you really are. Renwick's jaw tightened. You think you're better than me? I don't need to be better, Elias replied quietly. I just need to be honest. Renwick's hand slammed onto the press release. You could have taken all of this. Fame, genius status, awards. And you walked away. Why? Because I already learned what that kind of world does to people, Elias said. It turns truth into property, and men into thieves. Renwick's voice dropped to a whisper. What are you going to do? Elias looked at him with a calm that felt like a verdict. Nothing. The equation is public. The world is already asking the question. Renwick swallowed. What question? Who solved it? Elias stepped closer, eyes level. And the only person who can answer it is you. Renwick stared at him, chest tight. Every lie he had ever told pressing against him like a collapsing wall. Then Elias said 5 words that broke him. You get to choose. Professor. Renwick's face went pale, because he realized no one was threatening him. No one was forcing him. The truth wasn't coming like an attack. It was coming like a mirror. Elias turned to leave, but as his hand touched the door, Renwick spoke in a strained, shaking voice. What happens if I lie? Elias didn't turn around. He just said 3 quiet words, words that were not threat, but prophecy. Then history won't. The door closed. Renwick was alone. The decision was now his. And tomorrow, the world would hear his answer. The world chooses a side by sunrise. The university campus no longer felt like a place of learning. It felt like a storm waiting to break. Students gathered in clusters, whispering, refreshing their phones every few seconds. The online world was already on fire. Academics, journalists, tech CEOs, and math prodigies were all asking the same question: who solved the unsolvable equation? By 9 a.m., news vans had lined up outside the campus gates. Microphones, cameras, reporters rehearsing their lines. A mysterious mathematical breakthrough. The solver has not yet been identified. Rumors suggest the solution was written by a janitor. Nobody could confirm it. Everybody wanted to. Inside the main auditorium, the university had scheduled an emergency press conference. The podium stood ready. The press release was printed. A wall of cameras pointed forward like loaded rifles. At 10 a.m., Professor Renwick was supposed to walk out and make a statement. At 9:52, he was still in his office, staring at his reflection in the glossy surface of the announcement document. 2 paths still lay before him. Lie and live as a legend. Tell the truth and live as a man. The seconds ticked down. Meanwhile, Lena found Elias sitting on the back steps of the old physics building, eating a simple sandwich. No phone, no social media. No sign of fear or excitement, just quiet. You know, she said, sitting beside him, most people would be panicking right now. Elias took another bite. Most people are taught to panic when the world looks at them. You're not? He shook his head. I've already lived through the worst version of attention. She studied him. You don't care if Renwick gives you credit, do you? Elias looked up at the sky, the clouds moving slow and soft. Credit is a currency for people still trying to buy their worth. So what do you want? Elias answered without hesitation, for the truth to decide its own path. Lena stared at him, realizing something. He wasn't just a man who had suffered injustice. He was a man who had outgrown it. Panak a.m. The press conference room was packed. Reporters raised their hands even before the dean appeared. Cameras clicked. Screens flashed headlines. Breakthrough announcement. Imminent who solved the equation. Is the mystery genius about to be revealed? The dean stepped to the podium, but she wasn't alone. Renwick walked beside her. Students in the audience held their breath. He looked exhausted. Not sick, not defeated, just human. The dean spoke first. Thank you all for coming. Today, Professor Renwick will be addressing the recent solution to the advanced fluid dynamics equation posted in his lecture. Hall. Microphones turned toward him. The world leaned. Renwick placed his hands on the podium. His voice cracked. On the first word. The work on that board was not mine. A stunned silence detonated across the room. Reporters froze. Students gasped. The dean shut her eyes, half relieved, half terrified. Renwick continued, his voice shaking, not from weakness, but from weight. I did not solve the equation. I could not solve it. And I cannot take credit for what was done. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted, then who solved it? Is it true the janitor wrote the solution? Are you protecting someone? Renwick swallowed and then, finally, he spoke the name. Elias Cade. The backlash was immediate. Who? A janitor? Where are his credentials? Are you joking, Professor? Renwick raised a hand for silence. He is not a student, not a colleague, not a visiting scholar, but he is the one who completed the equation. And whether the world is ready or not, voice trembling, he is a mathematician of a caliber I have never seen. The room exploded. Shouts, questions, accusations. Is this a stunt? Where is he now? Does he have proof of his identity? Is this university validating a non-academic as a scientific authority? Renwick leaned into the microphone, voice breaking past pride, past fear, into truth. Yes, and I am not validating him. I am finally admitting I was never worthy to. The crowd was stunned, but only for a moment. Then came the attack. A reporter pointed sharply. If this man has no degree, no publications, no academic record, how do you expect us to believe he solved one of the hardest mathematical challenges in the world? Renwick paused, then answered with something no one expected. Because I watched him fix in minutes what the rest of us have failed for years. And I saw him do it without needing a witness, applause, or reward. That is how geniuses behave, not by collecting titles, but by outgrowing the people who define them. Outside the press hall, Elias was sweeping the courtyard, listening to the announcement through the open doors. He didn't stop sweeping, but he did close his eyes for a moment, not in relief, not in pride, but because something long dead inside him. Just took a breath again. The reaction was instant and global. Some were outraged. You don't get to be a genius without credentials. This is insulting to real scholars. A janitor solving elite math? Come on. Others were electrified. This could change everything we know about academia gatekeeping. What if talent exists outside the system? Who is Elias Cade and how do we find him? Within hours, hashtags trended. Let Elias speak. Truth doesn't need degrees. The janitor genius. And then, the first blowback, leaked university document. A faculty advisor posted an old disciplinary note from years earlier, a record listing Elias as a former research student flagged for academic misconduct. Most didn't understand it, but Elias did. They were starting again. The same playbook. Discredit, destroy, deny. Lena found him sitting outside the math building alone. As students argued nearby, "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked. Elias nodded. "They're already trying to erase you again." He didn't look angry, just disappointed. "I expected it," he said. "That's the first move of institutions, protect reputation, not truth." "But this time you're not alone," Lena said firmly. "This time people saw you. The equation is public. The work is undeniable." "And so," Elias murmured, "is the threat I represent. Why are you so calm?" she asked, frustrated. They're going to smear you again. Because I am not fighting them, Elias said quietly. I am watching what they choose to become. Lena stared at him. You really believe truth is enough, don't you? Elias smiled faintly. Truth doesn't need belief. It only needs time. She shook her head, overwhelmed. You're not angry at them, even after what they did? Elias took a slow breath. I'm not angry because anger means I still needed their approval. I don't. Then he looked at her. And for the first time, she saw something new in his eyes. Not pain, not bitterness, but peace. Before she could speak again, her phone buzzed with a notification. Her eyes widened. Oh no! What is it? She turned the screen toward him. A newly posted headline. University Board to hold. Emergency hearing. Janitor accused of intellectual. Fraudelia stared at the screen. There it was. Not just erasure. Trial. They were going to make him the villain. Again. Only this time. The entire world was watching. Lena's voice broke. They're going to put you on public record as a thief. They're going to destroy you again. Elias stood. Slow and steady. No, he said. They're going to try. He walked away without looking back. And Lena realized something terrifying and beautiful. Elias wasn't afraid of being destroyed. He was afraid of letting the world believe that only the system has the right to define genius. And now, he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for every unseen mind that ever lived in the shadows. But the board wasn't done. Within the hour, a second headline dropped. University offers Renwick full credit if he retracts his statement. Renwick was being bought, and whether he accepted would decide everything. Elias, the university, Renwick's own soul, the system itself, all now hung on one man's choice. And Renwick? He was sitting in his office again, staring at the contract, hands shaking, because once again, the world had given him power at the cost of truth, and this time, no one could save him from himself. The truth that could not be erased. The hearing was scheduled for the next morning, not in a courtroom, not in a private back office, but in the university's grand lecture hall, the same room where Elias once cleaned floors while no one knew his name. Now, every seat was filled. Students, professors, reporters, cameras, global, live stream. The university board sat at the long front table, stiff in subtle panic. Dean Harrow sat in the center, unreadable. Renwick sat off to the side, pale, eyes sunken. And at the end of the table, guarded by two campus officers, sat the man they were putting on trial, Elias Cade. No lawyer. No defense. Just him. One of the trustees cleared his throat into the microphone. This hearing has been called to determine whether the equation attributed to this individual, he gestured at Elias without looking at him, was in fact solved by him, or if this is an act of academic fraud or interference. A reporter whispered loudly, They're actually doing this. They're accusing the guy who solved it. Another muttered, They'd rather destroy a janitor than admit a genius exists outside their system. The trustee continued, Unless Mr. Cade can present certified credentials, verified research records, or academic proof of authorship, the university will not acknowledge his claim to the solution. Furthermore, before he could finish, Lena stood up. No. Every head turned. You don't get to pretend this is about proof, she said, voice trembling but steady. This is about control. About who is allowed to be brilliant. The room buzzed. A board member snapped, Miss, sit down or you will be removed. She didn't move. You erased him once, she said. You won't do it again. The trustee's jaw tightened. Order in the room. Before the guards could move toward her, a quiet voice spoke. Let her finish. Elias. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't afraid. He just didn't want the truth shouted by someone else when he could say it himself. The board allowed it. Lena sat slowly, her eyes locked with Elias's, a silent promise that he wasn't alone this time. The trustee turned to Elias. Do you wish to make a statement before we proceed? Elias nodded. He stood, not like a defendant, but like a man who no longer needed the world to believe him in order to exist. "I didn't come here for recognition," he said. "I came here to see what the truth does to power." The room went still. "I solved the equation because it was broken. Not for reward, not for a title, but because that is what mathematicians do. They fix what is false." He looked directly at the board, and I was erased, because I once did the same thing to something bigger than a formula. He stepped forward. "You want paperwork? Records, credentials? You want proof inside the walls of a system that already decided I didn't exist?" A heavy silence followed. Then he placed a single folded sheet onto the table. Not a degree, not an IDA published citation, a printout of an original research paper, one with his name once on it, but crossed out, replaced by another. "My work from 6 years ago," Elias said, before they erased me. "Before they claimed I fabricated my own result. Before I watched everything I built get assigned to someone more acceptable." Gasps. A professor in the audience pulled up the paper on his tablet and went pale. "It's real," he whispered. "The original draft. His name is on the metadata. He was the author," reporters began typing furiously. "This is incriminating," the trustee argued. "No," Elias replied. "This is history. Not the one you wrote. The one you buried." And then something unexpected happened. Professor Renwick stood. Everyone watched. He walked to the podium. Voice unsteady, but honest. "This man did what I could not, will not, and never will." He solved the equation. Not as a student, not as a scholar, not as someone the system approved. He looked at the entire hall, but as someone who proved the system wrong. He turned to Elias. "For years, I believed genius belonged to institutions. That greatness had gates. That talent needed permission." His voice broke. "Then you walked into my classroom and shattered everything I thought I knew." Murmurs spread, some sympathetic, some stunned. Renwick wasn't done. "The board offered me full credit if I erased him again, if I lied, if I helped bury the truth so the world could stay comfortable." He looked at the board. "I refuse." The room erupted. Students stood and clapped. Reporters shouted questions. But above the chaos, one sound rose louder, chanting, "Elias! Elias! Elias!" The board members panicked. This was not the script. Dean Harrow finally stood, raising a hand for quiet. "Enough." The chant faded. Her voice was calm. "Too calm. Let me make something clear," she said. "We are not here to decide whether Elias solved the equation. That has already been proven." The board members turned in shock. She continued. "We are here to decide whether this institution will remain a gatekeeper of truth, or finally recognize that brilliance does not need permission to exist." The entire hall froze. Slowly, she turned to Elias. "Mr. Cade, on behalf of this university, I apologize for what was done then, and for what was nearly done again." A trustee hissed, "Dean!" She raised a hand sharply. "No, not this time." She faced the room. "This university was built on the idea of discovering truth. Somewhere along the way, it started protecting status instead. Today, we correct that." She looked at Elias once more. "We offer you restoration of your academic record, your authorship, a research position, and full rights to the work you were stripped of." Gasps, applause, shock. But Elias didn't smile. He didn't move. He simply asked, "Will you also change the system that allowed it to happen in the first place?" The dean paused. Silence filled the room. Then, "We will start by listening to the people we've ignored." Elias nodded once. That was enough. He didn't want revenge. He didn't want a throne. He wanted change, and for the first time, he saw a doorway instead of a wall. When the hearing ended, students flooded around him. Some wanted photos. Some wanted signatures. Some just said, "Thank you." Lena found him last, so she asked softly, "What now?" Elias looked at the campus, the place he once swept, erased, forgotten. "What now?" he repeated with a small smile. "Now I start again, not because they let me, but because I never needed permission." "And your past?" she asked. He shook his head. My past isn't what they did to me. It's what I chose to do anyway. She smiled, eyes bright. You know, you didn't just solve an equation. What did I solve? You proved that the world doesn't get to decide who matters. Elias looked at her. No, the world tried. But the truth decided otherwise. That night, an online article went viral. The janitor who solved the impossible. Genius without permission. The story of Elias Cade. A new era, when truth outruns credentials. Within a month, scholarships were created in Elias's name, not for high grades, but for unrecognized brilliance. Within a year, academic reform panels cited his case as a turning point in global education. And somewhere, in a quiet office, Elias wrote again, not equations this time, but a note to himself. Some people spend their whole lives waiting to be allowed in. Some build the door, others break the wall. But the truth doesn't wait for doors. He set down the pen, and with the same calm grace he once cleaned floors, he got back to work, because genius was never about applause. It was about purpose, and his had just begun.